6:30, and so I'm going to go ahead and welcome everyone this evening to the joint work session with the City Council and the City Budget Committee this the 13th of July 2021. We'll go ahead and call on Claudia to do a roll call if she would.
Committee Member Haas.
Present.
Councillor Garvin. Committee Member Hart.
Oh, he's not able to come.
Councillor Geary.
Here.
Committee Member Hofstadter.
Here.
Councillor Chenoweth.
Present.
Committee Member Seiler.
Here.
Councillor Peralta.
Here.
Committee Member Phoenix. Councillor Minky.
Here.
Committee Member Harmon Ferry.
Here.
Committee Member Maxfield.
Here.
Council President Drapkin.
Here.
And Mayor Hill.
Here. Thank you, Claudia. And again, welcome everyone and staff that are on the call also. We have 3 items this evening that we're going to be going over in our joint session with the Budget Committee. The first one is we're going to be looking at the American Rescue Plan, the ARPA, and the city's allocation as a part of the state and local fiscal recovery funds. And then after that, we'll have an opportunity to look at resources and sustainable city services. And then we'll look at the fiscal year 2023 budget cycle. We've got a good, solid packet of information that's been sent out to us, and hopefully you have availability of that packet. And so with that being said, let's turn the meeting over to Jennifer to run us through those items. We've got an hour and a half to have a good, lively discussion this evening. So Jennifer, welcome, and we turn it over to you.
Well, super.
Jennifer, would you mind if I just sort of kicked it off with a couple of introductory remarks?
No, that would be stupendous. Thanks.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Oh, thanks, Mayor. It occurs to me that particularly while we have talked about this issue with the council and the budget committee, for the public record, it's important to state that this is the first of what we expect to be several joint meetings between the city council and the budget committee. Tonight's the night to really sort of lay the groundwork and to get some kind of initial feedback and questions on the big issues. But this substantial packet of information that we have provided you under sort of earlier emails, as well as this cover and the follow-up slideshow, is really intended to inform a several meetings long series of discussions and ultimately decisions. So it's a lot of information. We know that some of the information is relatively new to you, and we just want to make sure that for the public record, folks understand that this is a longer series of conversations, and the council really isn't at a significant decision-making point tonight. But for a couple of issues, which Jennifer will highlight for you as she walks you through the presentation. Thank you for that brief time.
And Jeff, thank you for those overall arching comments. Again, I know this has taken a lot of effort to get to this point to have our discussion this evening. So again, thank you. And we'll turn it over to Jennifer. Jennifer?
Okay, great. Well, let me see if I can do the screen share effectively. Can you all see the opening slide, session 1? Yes? Okay, great. So this is kind of the roadmap for tonight, and we'll see how it goes. So I'd like to spend 40 minutes talking about the American Rescue Plan, and then an equivalent amount of time in a first session talking about the resources and sustainability of our overall city services. And then we'll have, I want to leave a little bit of time left at the end to get a little briefing on where we're at in terms of FY23 budget process changes and updates. So I can't see everyone on my computer screen. So if folks have questions, I'm not sure whether someone's in a position to be able to call on you, or if you can just, if you're a member of the budget committee or council, you're more than welcome to just shout out the question or stop me. Does that work for folks?
That would work. That would work great, Jennifer. Just given the limited views that we have, if you've got questions, just speak out and we'll recognize anyone with questions that are.
Can I make a quick point? Both Jeff and Claudia are really good at watching the chat box.
Well, that's an idea. If you want to put questions to the chat, then that's another way to do it too. So great. Well, I'm going to go ahead and launch then. Let's see here. So just diving into the ARPA, what we're hoping to get out of the 40 minutes on this subject tonight is I want to share some background on the ARPA, what our allocation is, how the state local fiscal recovery funds fit into the larger ARPA, the $1.9 trillion act, and then have discussion with you all to get feedback on principles that we want to apply for evaluating investments that we make using these dollars, look at the roadmap for our process over the summer, just kind of look at the dates and sequencing of activities. And then also, if we've got time, get some feedback from you in terms of our community engagement activities around this. So that's my objective for these first 40 minutes. So this is a great snapshot of the entire $1.9 million American Rescue Plan that was passed. So our funding is in this blue box here, the state local fiscal recovery funds. So our allocation that we get is from this bundle of money. It's $350 billion. There are many other components, as you can see, and you may not be able to read this well, but you can use this slide deck also as a reference. There's some good graphics. So I have been participating in a lot of different educationals on this, and so I am taking slides. PFM, this is our municipal advisor company. I've taken sessions with them. You'll see slides from the National League of Cities. So borrowing heavily on the expertise of others here. So it's important to understand that communities are going to be getting access to these funds in a number of different ways. So there's the direct aid to local governments, like we are getting. There's also direct aid to individuals, businesses, and organizations, NGOs, nonprofits primarily. And then there are additional state pass-through funds that are going to predominantly be utilizing formulas that are used for different block grant programs, but there are also some discretionary funding. So, and this is borrowed from Eco Northwest. So I think this is a good representation of a level of the complexity, but also that folks will be able to have access to these dollars beyond simply the city's allocation that we get here, right? So zooming in on the SLFRF funding, the $350 billion. So the city of McMinnville, our allocation is coming out of this piece of the pie. And so we are a jurisdiction that, because we don't get CDBG, Community Development Block Grants directly, we aren't on that formula. We are getting passed through from the state of Oregon. And so by virtue of being in this slice of the pie, while we do have fairly stringent reporting requirements, our reporting requirements are less heavy than other jurisdictions will be facing. So I really liked this. Yeah.
I just really quickly want to point out that Councilor Garvin has joined the meeting.
Oh, great. Welcome. So I thought this was a really good way of kind of looking at the upside and the challenges associated with these dollars. So, and as they say, these are good problems to have. So in terms of the upside, we're going to be getting a lot of money to provide immediate relief to the extent that folks are still suffering on the ground, as well as, you know, to the extent that we may wish to dedicate dollars directly to public health activities, even though, you know, that's not our core activity, that's more a county thing. The funding is lasting, will go into 5 years runtime. I see a hand up.
Meredith? Go ahead, Meredith.
Hi, I have a quick question. Is there going to be any way that we'll know how much money is coming to our community outside of the SLFRF funding? Like, will we know if any small businesses have applied for money from the ARPA?
That is, we could decide to invest money in trying to keep a tally of that. There is an effort to be transparent about how the dollars are being used, but so far I'm not sure how we're going to be able to access that. But certainly I think it's something, if we do have access to the data, that we'll want to try to get a handle on. But we also, part of what we need to be doing as we're working through what we want to do with the money is working with the partners who are also working in our community to make sure that this is one of the challenges that is highlighted, that program designs may overlap inefficiently. And so we'll want to be creating lines of communication so that we're covering the community to the best of our ability with the resources that are available. So that's a really good question. Other things to look at is that there are resources for business recovery, as there were during previous coronavirus relief packages. The dedicated support to cities, that's really good for us. Oh, and Jeff, did you want to jump in? Oh, you're muted.
It's my first day on Zoom. Sorry about that. Just a little more response in additional clarification to Mara's question. It will be relatively easy for us to figure out what our government partners receive and some of our local partners who receive direct allocations. It, I think, will be more difficult to find out what private sector businesses may receive. A lot of those programs are still competitive. And we, may have sort of anecdotal or some success in figuring that out as folks make announcements. So I think it's going to be a little bit easier to track the public sector allocations and the direct allocations to some of our nonprofit partners. But the private sector money and some of the nonprofit money is going to be competitive, in which case I think it's going to be a challenge to really know for sure who has gotten funds and who hasn't.
Well, actually, that's really a good point. And also the direct relief to households. much of that comes in the form of tax breaks, which will be really difficult to quantify. So we'll see what level of information the federal government is going to be putting together about all of these sources. So I think another item that I just on this slide want to point out is that we do want to be aware and cognizant that we're likely to have follow-up infrastructure funding passed at a federal level that will also be very sizable. And so because these funds can be used in some kinds of infrastructure projects, you do have the challenge of making the choice. Do you want to make large investments now or wait later until it's clearer what's happening with the infrastructure dollars? So there are a lot of moving pieces right now. So now we get into some of the numbers that I've been able to pull together. So of the SLFRF dollars, Yamhill County, we know by formula, is getting over 20 million. Our number is still an estimated number. We still don't have the figure. Although I do understand we'll be able to start applying for those dollars next week. So hopefully that means we'll actually get our number. But it's a nice large one. 7.7 million is more or less what we expect. The city of Newburgh, for example, about 5.3. There is direct money going to public school districts, and the McMinnville Public School District, is 9.4 million. There are dollars going to higher ed, and I found the Chemeketa's allocation. It's over $22 million. Now, that's split almost halvesies in student aid to the kids attending school, but the balance is for the institution. And Linfield as well. There's a split between student aid and money available to the institution to utilize. So these are some examples of the small business assistance funding streams that different federal agencies are managing. So there's $25 billion in restaurant revitalization fund grants, shuttered venues. So, we're familiar with some of those venues that have been closed down. Over $16 billion there. More paycheck protection program money. Airport concessions, there's a little bit of money. And then we also do need to be aware that the state is likely to utilize some of its SLFRF dollars also to bolster small business support programs. Then direct aid to households, things coming through the federal agencies. Here's the child tax credit expansion, child care independent tax credit, other activities. And then there are other funding streams outside of SLFRF that are going through the states. And some examples are the Homeowners Assistance Fund, which we know 90 million is coming to Oregon. The Emergency Rental Assistance Program, over 204 million are going to counties of our size. So it remains to be seen how much will filter down to Yamhill County. Then let's see. So here just are a list of other examples of funding, interesting ones. The Museum and Library Services are doing competitive grants, and Oregon's getting $3 million. And when I saw this, I asked Jenny Berg about it, and Jenny knew all about it. So she's keeping an eye on that funding stream as a potential for us. More homelessness assistance programming, AmeriCorps and Vista funding, substance abuse and prevention block grants are going up by 1.5 billion. Community mental health service block grants, also another 1.5 billion.
Jennifer is back. Gary has his hand up.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. Go ahead.
No apologies needed. Thank you. Just real quick on this list, confirming my assumption that all of these monies, if accessible, would be in addition to that baseline 7 point whatever million we're getting.
Exactly.
These are just sort of other programs going on. Okay, cool. Thanks.
Exactly. I want folks to get an awareness of how complicated and interesting this quilt is. And we've got several years to figure it out, but it does mean that we need to be talking with our partners out there to make sure that we're all kind of aware and coordinating our efforts. And I noticed this one last week. I don't know if this might be something relevant in our community because of there is an agricultural base, but the Commodity Credit Corporation for farm price stabilization purposes has almost $1 billion available to it. So this is just a handful of items. So now to get more specific on our dollars and what we need to understand about those. So I actually printed, this is word for word what our requirements are. So these recovery funds are intended to support us in responding to the impact of COVID-19, the efforts to contain COVID-19 in our communities, to support our residents and businesses in their recovery. And it's also to build support and build on the funding that we received in previous iterations of this type of aid. So just some general information. We think we will have the cash in our hands late July, possibly into August. I believe Oregon does now have the money in their bank accounts. As I mentioned before, we're still on an estimate, and just to make sure that people understand the time period we're talking about. So the initial date was March 3rd, so a few months ago, through December 31st, 2024. So that's our fiscal year 25. But that's the obligation. The expenditures off these obligations can extend for another 2 years. So for us, this takes us to fiscal year 26-27. So if we engaged in contracts that extended through this period, we would still be able to be utilizing those dollars across a very long time scale. Longer than many grant programs that I've seen in my career. So I also want to be, oh, yes? Peter?
Sorry, I got to unmute. Too many things to do. Just so I understand that last chart, so just for argument's sake, if we're getting $7.7 million, we will get the $7.7 million by the end of July?
We'll get it in 2 payments.
Okay.
They'll split it up, yeah.
And then the chart before that is all, for lack of a better term, competitive bidding, or, you have to put in grant, applications or whatever. Is that correct?
Well, all of the other different sources, you mean?
Yeah, that you showed, like Jenny's looking at the library,
Yeah.
all those. So those are applied for. There's no guarantees in any of that stuff.
Yeah, no, that's all. Each funding stream is going to have different rules. Some will be competitive grants. Others will be direct awards to households or direct awards to businesses. Some may be put out on formulas. It's just There's many different ways these are going to be administered.
Okay, but we will get a big fat hunk of dough here shortly, basically.
That is our understanding. Yes, indeed. So,
Thanks.
yeah, and we're excited about that.
I guess so. Yeah.
So so to that end, we really need to understand what the eligible uses are for these monies. So where the rubber meets the road. So there are 4 categories. There's response to, it's the public health emergency response, and responding to its negative economic impacts as well. So we're allowed to spend money on assistance to households, small businesses, nonprofits, industries impacted, and it's called out in statute, tourism, travel, and hospitality. The second category is to support workers who performed essential duties during the pandemic emergency period by providing premium pay to folks. So that's kind of a new animal, but that's an eligible use of these funds. Then the third group is, this is the lost revenue component. I have not yet made the calculation on our lost revenue, so I don't honestly have a sense of the scale of it. But once we make that determination, those funds are further restricted. We can use them to provide government services, but they can't be used to just drop down to the bottom line to our reserves or that kind of thing. But we will be able to utilize them for government services that are not explicitly COVID related.
So Jennifer?
Yes?
Let me ask a question, because we know of one area that we are going to have impact from COVID, and that is in the state gas taxes and the money that comes to us for transportation, specifically our street maintenance and those types of things. So we could see a possibility if we could track the fewer dollars coming from the state because of the less travel, the less gas being used. Is that an example of one that might be eligible under that title?
Yes, it is. That example is explicitly part of the National League of Cities presentations, because street infrastructure is not allowable explicitly. And the fourth activity is investments in water, sewer, or broadband infrastructure. They're called out specifically. So streets are not on that list. But if we chose, we could utilize all of, if we wanted, the funds that we get from lost revenue could be utilized for streets. They could be utilized for police officers. They could be utilized for park staff. I mean, there just are any number of ways. And so I hesitate to get real deep into it because until we know the scale of it, its significance for us, at this point, I don't know. But Jeff, you want to jump in?
Absolutely.
Well, thanks, Jennifer. The other note about the lost revenue issue is that the calculations are very prescriptive and not entirely clear. I know there have been a variety of requests for clarification on how that formula is supposed to work. It's not clear whether we can do analysis by specific revenue streams or by fund, or whether it's an organization-wide view. The other thing to note is while we may be able to request our first drawdown, and while we have seen the draft proposed rules, the final day for comment on the proposed rules is also July 19th. And it will take some time after that comment period closes for the final rules to ultimately be published. So, we're not exactly flying blind on this, but there's still lots of detailed questions that we won't be able to answer until we've seen those final rules and probably had some time to analyze them.
Okay, so I'm just looking at the time, and we've got about 10 minutes left in the allotment of time that we made for this. So I'm going to kind of speed through these next slides. Folks can refer back to some of these examples of what is eligible. So here are lists of specific pandemic response eligibility. This is an important one in terms of, to the extent that we have qualified census tracts, our ability to provide programming and justifications for the programming, it's a lower bar. And I missed getting Heather's maps in here, so I'm just gonna throw them up. We do have a few qualified census tracts. So these are the areas of the city where we will want to be concentrating, if we can, our recovery dollars, because these are the poorest folks among us who have been proportionally hardest hit by the impacts of the pandemic. So that's another detail that's interesting and complicated, but good.
Here's a copy of those map slides.
Yes, absolutely. We'll add that to the website, additional information for the meeting, and I'll send it out to everyone. So here are examples of workforce personnel. We might choose to look at supplementing their income during the pandemic. Here are examples of infrastructure projects that, so these are kinds of details I'm not aware of, but other members of city staff will be well-versed in eligible projects under these two funding streams. Cybersecurity, things that we've been talking about, climate change and resilience. Some of those things dovetail nicely with conversations council's been having over the last few months. Here's some more broadband specifics. Here's more specifics on the lost revenue. And actually just last week, the GFOA put together a calculator. So I am so glad I didn't attempt to kind of wade in and figure this out, because we may be able to get at least a decent estimate using this tool. So now prohibited uses, important to understand. We cannot use these dollars for pension funds. We can't use them for reserves or rainy day funds. We can't use them to bid down our debt burden on any projects. They can't offset tax cuts, but I don't think that's relevant for us. And we can't spend it on other infrastructure projects. And then matching funds can get tricky. So those are the...
Jennifer, real quickly, matching funds, you can't apply these to programs that have matching funds?
It depends on what the partner program is. So some rules may allow it and others may not. So it's just a tricky patchwork. We'd have to look at case by case. Let's see. So now we're in the feedback section. We've got 5 minutes or so. Let's see what we can get done here. So I don't know if folks had had the opportunity to look at the proposed principles, but my hope is that if we look at each of them together and get a sense of, is there consensus, this looks fine, no, this is terrible, let's take it out, or no, this is pretty good, but let's wordsmith it. If I could get someone to work with me to make any improvements to any of the principles, I think that's probably the best next steps to moving to finalizing a draft for this. So here's the first of 5, that we want to utilize our SLFRF investments to address the existing disparities that were exacerbated by the pandemic. Helping women, BIPOC communities, and those who were disproportionately harmed by the pandemic and natural disasters of 2020 should drive decision-making. So kind of consensus on that.
If I may, I might change disproportionately harmed to historically marginalized communities that were disproportionately harmed, because that's very individual. I think that's very broad to say those who are disproportionately harmed, that there's so many factors beyond what I think we're trying to address in this statement.
Okay. That sounds like a good edit to me. Folks comfortable with that?
Yeah. In addition, maybe Remy, you could jump in on this. The only additional thought I had, not to what the wordage is here, but in terms of these principles in general, do you think it's worth running this through or pass it or by or engage in our DEI group for a review of these as well to make sure that those hit the mark?
I do.
Cool. I would agree that would be helpful as well.
I would be interested in hearing process-wise how that will affect things moving forward, given it's a monthly committee that just had a meeting, and what time frame our finance director needs moving forward.
Well, I was hopeful that if we needed to edit, that I'd be able to circ those next week, and that we could at our next meeting just, get a stamp of approval or any, last minute fine tuning, so that we are in a position to begin to make some choices. And again, we've got plenty of time, but there are folks out there in need now, so it's a balancing act. Peter?
Yeah, and if I'm in the weeds too much, just tell me to be quiet. That's okay. I have no problem conceptually with this, but does it have to have anything slightly more specific, where it says disproportionately harmed or whatever? We're going to change the words to something in terms of whatever it is, housing or job search, or, something like that, something that talks a little less broad, I guess, than just disproportionately harmed. I just worry about getting into a round, a circular conversation about what that is. That's my only question.
If I may, that's why I'm suggesting we include language that's specific to historically marginalized communities as opposed to disproportionately harmed communities, because the disproportionate harm comes through all of our systems, whether that's education or healthcare, and is inclusive of city services that are offered. It's kind of a truth that we know that historically marginalized communities continue to be disproportionately harmed. Jennifer, I would be happy to work with you on the language of this, not during a council meeting.
Okay, great. That would be great.
Sal?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I would agree with the suggestion that Remy made, but as an addition to, not in lieu of, disproportionately harmed. Was that what your intent was, Remy, or were you gonna have it in lieu of?
No, I was thinking in addition to, but to rework the language on this for something that maybe feels a little bit more exacting to what we're intending to convey. Sal, I'd be happy to work with you on this as well.
Sure, sounds good, just in the interest of time. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Great. So here's the next one. Make McMinnville more resilient. The pandemic and historic wildfires showed weaknesses in our infrastructure and society that we should work to shore up, leveraging our efforts to create a more environmentally sustainable community and city organization. Initial thoughts on this one?
One comment, of course, the wildfire impact was huge and the threat of future wildfires is also huge. Are those principles consistent with the framework for the funding, which was primarily COVID related?
Well, I'll tell you, I utilize the state of Oregon's principles as my starting point, and they specifically called out the wildfires. Mm-hmm. And I figured, well, if the state of Oregon can call them out, then we can call them out too. So that was my thought. My question wasn't to indicate any opposition to it. I think it's a good idea. I just wanted to tease that out a bit. Thank you. Yeah, no, it's good that we do want to keep sight on the eligible requirements for sure. Councillor Menke?
It's like, I mean, there's been a number of crises this year. One that comes to mind is the intense heat we had for
Oh, I think her internet maybe has gone down.
To become.
So, Kelly, we weren't able to hear you. I think you're frozen still.
I maybe what she was going, unless she jumps back in, and not to put words in her mouth, but maybe it was opening the door for something additional at the end of sort of pandemic and historic wildfires, and just sort of a new landscape of emergencies. I think she was leading maybe there with the heat and other things, and a changing landscape of foibles around every corner that we need to learn and be more robust and resilient about and plan for.
Okay.
Debbie also has her hand up. Debbie?
Yeah, just tapping into that. I think maybe we could, instead of just listing wildfires, could we say historic climate-related events? That covers the ice storms, the fires, and the heat that's all been unusual this year.
That's a good thought.
Yeah, I would agree and second that, yeah.
Okay, great.
I would second that as well.
Oh, super. So I think definitely we will be circling out a second draft of this, and I'll work with Amanda to figure out from a rules perspective how we can move that process forward, if we can do that kind of offline, or whether how much we need to be together to make these choices on small changes. But this is great discussion. So the next principle is invest in programs where the pandemic has shown us there is a better way. This last year has exposed deficiencies and challenges in many of our basic operations, facilities, city services, programs, and ability to communicate effectively with our partners and constituents. Addressing these deficits is entirely consistent with McMinnville's value of being courageous as we embrace the future and change that is good for our community. So any thought on this principle? Okay, a thumbs up, I can see. 2 thumbs up. All right, I'm moving on, folks. So the next one is act where possible with local and regional partners to collectively maximize the impact of these dollars. working together to make innovations in providing local safety net services and economic support to local business has been vital over the last year and should continue to be an operational strategy in our investment choices. Thoughts here? Saw a thumbs up. Okay, 2, I'm moving on. That's all I need, 2 thumbs, okay. So the next group of things are a little less expansive. So we want to seek investments that are aligned with MacTown 2032 strategic priorities and council goals, to evaluate investment proposals that advance the locally defined priorities of the community. Does that sound good for folks? Okay. Next, we recognize that these are one-time funds, and to the extent possible, investments made should not increase the city's carrying costs. Selective use of a portion of the federal money to bridge what is anticipated to be a near-term budget gap as we endeavor to create a more sustainable financial footprint to support critical city services may make sense. Thoughts on that?
Sorry, go ahead.
I didn't raise my hand, so sorry.
Me neither. Go ahead, please, you first.
I mean, no, I think this is perfect. And in my brain, this ought to be the first thing that we put up there. That ought to be the first principle, just so you set the tone going forward. Because I think that's really critical, because otherwise, it's going to be a free-for-all.
My comment is that, my comment is I almost read this the opposite. I feel like this kind of opens the door for the use of these one-term funds to bridge a near-term gap. And I really want to just go on the record as saying that I do not like the idea of us using any of these funds to bridge funding gaps that existed previous to COVID-19 that are not directly the result of COVID-19. I mean, I understand we may need to, but I think it should be absolutely minimized to the extent possible.
Well, maybe we can make the language a little clearer around that. Are folks open to having the door open, but kind of last resort type?
Well, I actually agree with the committee members' comments. I think, particularly the first sentence, to the extent possible, investment should not increase the city's carrying costs. I think that kind of, some of what we need to be doing here is be looking, while I understand Councilor Peralta's point, we need to be very careful not to be just filling holes that in 5 years, all of a sudden, we're going to have the holes right back at us. I get that. I think we need a foundational position rather than some of this other statements, a foundational position of how we want to see this money used first. And I think this is a good one for that.
Okay. Any other discussion? All right. I think we're getting towards the end here. So public accountability and participation is key. These funds are game-changing in size and scope, and the public needs to see and weigh in on how these dollars will work for them. Folks comfortable with this sentiment? All right, hearing, yeah?
This is Terry. I just have one thing to add about that, and it's really related back to a couple of slides before when we were talking about working with public or private partners. And one of the issues that we face, like every other organization in human existence, is that once you've found a partner that you like to work with, you tend to keep working with them. And if we are looking for diversity and inclusion of formerly unincluded people, I think we need to make sure that as we're looking at game changing in size and scope and getting the public to weigh in, that we make an effort to change the way we look at our public and private partners. That's all.
Okay. Any other comments? So, oh, no, I was wrong. Another one, the investment timeframe is generous. So investments may be staged over the next several years to maximize impact. The award period covers project obligations made by December 31st, 2024, with a final expense date of those obligated dollars by December 31st, 2026. So in other words, we don't have to allocate all the money this year or this summer by any stretch.
And I want to understand that I'm reading that correctly. So that means that the money has to be spent entirely by December 31, 2026, or allocated in a budget by then?
No, they have to be obligated. So if so I'll work with Amanda to make sure that we're crystal clear on what all these terms mean, but in my mind, that means contracts. So for example, infrastructure, if you decided to build a big old broadband new thing, but it's going to take you 3 years, as long as you do the contracting choice before December 31st, 2024, the actual execution and payments of those dollars can keep going for the next 2 years following. Does that make sense?
It does. So you can be under contract by then, and as long as you're under contract, you can spend it within a 2-year period.
Correct. And you would budget it, of course, if, so, Peter?
Thank you.
Yeah, just a quick question. You may have already answered this, but if we're going to get a hunk of dough the end of the month, we're obviously not going to spend it immediately. Are we allowed to put it in an interest-bearing account while we decide?
Yes, we are. And the interest earned is not restricted. It's just our money. Yay! And in this interest rate environment, we're just going to make so much money.
Well, it's better than zero.
Yes, true. Yes.
And it's more than we had the day before, so.
True. Okay. So are there any thoughts of investment principles or criteria that we've missed? So hearing nothing, and in the interest of time, I'm going to move on. So this, oh, sorry. So next steps, seems like we will schedule, there's another meeting scheduled for August 16th. We'll have an hour then, so we can hopefully approve our principles. And maybe I would say, so that we can get moving on the resources discussion, perhaps at that time we should discuss the further community engagement, which are these last slides. So I see a hand up, but I don't see a name. I'm sorry.
It's Alison Seiler here.
Oh, hi.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
This was just an area, these roadmaps, where when I was reading it, I noticed that apart from all the mention of public input into the spending of the money, you don't actually see this on the chart. In other words, there's no mention of public input. And I just thought it might be nice to show that somehow.
Okay. So I guess just in response, the coordinating with partners, although maybe that's not what you're speaking of, the public input about deciding how to utilize the funds?
No, I'm talking about the side panels. Council, Budget Committee, Executive Team, City Department, Finance does not reflect any public input.
Oh, I think that the Budget Committee and the Council is the main vehicle for public input.
Right,
But,
I just thought it could say council, community and budget committee or something that would indicate that we're actually going to reach out for input.
Okay. So I guess we have a choice here. I had a couple of slides going to the question that Allison just raised, is kind of better defining what you all want to see in terms of the community engagement component of this. We could do that, but it's really going to, we only have about half an hour left to get to the conversation. So Jeff has a suggestion.
So what I heard from the committee is an interest in public engagement and a commitment to that. I would think the type and the scope of public engagement is going to be largely driven by some of the early preferences for how the funds may be spent. There are different stakeholders that you would want to engage depending on what kind of project or what kind of work you're doing. And I think once this group starts to narrow the field and kind of come up with initial ideas about priorities, that will give us a better roadmap on who we need to engage and how we need to engage them.
Okay. Great. Well, I'm going to turn off this slideshow and get into the next subject. Are people comfortable with that?
Yes, Jennifer, so that we can at least have an opportunity to go over all three topics this evening.
Great. So turn off. Fine, save it. So here's the next one. Oh. You know what? It just I'm going to leave it in this view. It's jumping around on my screen. So here's what our goals are for the resources and sustainability, sustainable city services. So I wanted to give you a background on the resource gap and kind of how we got here, and then get funding on criteria for evaluating some of our resource options available, and then actually look at resource options that staff should begin to research so that we can start deliberations on options available, and then also the roadmap for this discussion. So we've got half an hour. I guess really we should just spend about 20-25 minutes, so we still have a few minutes for council leadership to give an update on the budget process. So I'll jump in here. So right now, the cost of City of McMinnville services in the general fund, the annual revenue we collect tends to be approximately $2 million higher than the amount of money we spend in any given year. And the way that we've been addressing that budget gap has been a combination of utilizing reserves, we've reduced service levels, we've postponed capital investments and deferred maintenance. So the city has been and is grappling with the sustainability issue. 2 years ago, a wastewater franchise fee was implemented. That's like $500,000. We are exploring the feasibility of creating a fire district or coordinated fire services across a larger greater McMinnville area. And just to note, I believe there's a work session coming up on August 16th talking about this particular topic. And then we're also seeing a resource gap in the street maintenance and stormwater management fund. And so our ability to address weather events and move forward all kinds of community livability projects funded exclusively by state gas tax, we're also seeing a resource gap there. So in terms of what are the city services that the community gets for these dollars? So the general fund supports public safety investments in the police, fire and EMS, 911 in the municipal court. Then there are the livability and what makes life good to live part of things with the library, parks and rec, and then just the backbone, the planning efforts so that we continue to have a McMinnville that works for us and will work for us in the future. Then in terms of state gas tax, that supports street maintenance and all the stormwater, the street tree program that they operate, and emergency weather service response. So these are all things that combine to make our community a great place to live. So the core services by department are detailed in the budget documents. And just to let you know that the executive team met all day today to further advance the conversation on core services and how that fits in not only to this conversation, but just in general, prioritizing what we all do as a city organization at large. So that advances a city council goal for the year. Then just some insight on, this is overall, all city funds, kind of the balance of our revenue sources right now. Charges for services and property tax kind of are the main engine. And then this year, the intergovernmental has grown because this does include the $7 million. We went ahead and put the entire amount in for this budget. Then in terms of the general fund specifically, property tax is the main workhorse funding source for general fund activities, followed by charges for services, which this is the lion's share here are EMS payments. Let's see. So that's our current funding picture. So just, we know revenues aren't keeping pace with community needs and that the needs exceed the available resources. So this is a situation that's taken a lot of time to develop. The two property tax measures in the early 90s kind of kicked this off. And so property taxes just don't keep pace with inflation, population and development growth. Also of note is that
Jennifer, Sal has a question. His hand's up.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Jennifer, for recognizing me. Question, the EMS shortfall, oh wait, I think I'm seeing it. So the EMS shortfall is 1 million of the 2 million?
Yeah, in this last year, that's what it's grown to. And it's this started almost 20 years ago with a fundamental change in how Medicare funds its use of ambulance services, the caps on that. And so the first year that the city kicked in property tax to subsidize emergency medical was in fiscal 2004. Yeah, Chris, do I see your hand?
Yeah, I have several questions regarding some of the assumptions made in here. And I apologize. I should have been more diligent about prepping and looking at the slide presentation earlier than I did. So I did not get those questions in a format that would have saved a bunch of time. So I'm curious, can I just send you those questions in written format and whatever ones you feel should be forwarded to the rest of the council? you guys can choose to do that, and I'll just include you and Jeff.
I think that is a fabulous idea. And I would say, everyone, if you have questions about the history or any of the financial information or more information that would be helpful for you, why don't you all send me those questions? If you can get them to me by the end of this week, we can start working them up for you. Is that good?
That is great. Thank you so much.
Okay, no, super. So we did want to call out that just that fundamental change, and it doesn't just affect McMinnville, right? Is one of the things that is really put a lot of pressure on the city's ability to deliver all of its services, because we've had to invest more and more of our unrestricted property tax dollars into the EMS services in particular. So just in the budget cycle that we approved just a few weeks ago, the current expenses in the general fund are 1.8 million higher than our current revenues. So even though we are cutting back a number of services, there are the furloughs, we still have a really large current budget gap, even in this budget cycle. So McMinnville also has a history of taking a really conservative approach on capital spending. And so we have been particularly cautious in terms of allocating funds to those big dollar capital assets. And we've chosen on balance to maintain staffing levels, because they're the folks who are the engine for providing services to the community. So for example, the street maintenance fleet vehicles, their average age is over 20 years old. Then we also, in 2019, there was a study of the condition of city facilities, and that revealed 10 million in facility maintenance needs near term, next 5 years, then almost 24 million over the next 15. And so these were findings that prompted the council to create the new the Community Advisory Committee, the MACPAC, to explore options for a new community center, an aquatic center, and library facilities. So there are a lot of moving pieces to how we got to our budget gap. Then we've got the introduction of MacTown 2032, and residents ask us to do more and to make the community. I don't know, Jeff, you just have such a great way of characterizing the lessons learned coming out of this process. Do you mind jumping in?
Sure, thanks, Jennifer. I mean, part of what we heard really consistently through the course of the entire strategic planning process is how much people valued the services and saw a direct connection between the livability that they appreciated about McMinnville and the services that we provided. And so we did not hear, for instance, that government was too large, that there were things that we were doing that were sort of misdirected in terms of our kind of high-level service approaches, that folks valued the full service, the full range of services that the city provided, and expected those services to improve as the community.
The sauce is like really spicy. Like it's so
spicy. Sal, you're not muted, and there was back noise.
Sorry, my daughter was just bringing my dinner. I apologize.
No problem.
Thanks, Jeff. So
Go ahead, Jeff.
So MacTown 2032, we aspire to do even more within a pretty limited financial footprint. And then just, the reality of the costs of services are increasing. Most of our costs are people, And there are public sector retirement escalators that put pressure on that. And then also just we want to maintain the best and brightest in terms of the city workforce. And McMinnville is a competitive, we want to be a competitive employer in, a really competitive overall job market. So that also puts pressure on employee costs. So then I also want to point out for folks that there are a number of funding streams that are restricted to particular purposes that we do not have discretion to utilize for the kinds of services that are within the general fund. So some examples are wastewater fees paid by residents and businesses and all the customers. They can only be used to pay for the wastewater system. Property taxes that are voted for particular bond issues, they must only and exclusively be used to pay that debt service. And we've got a couple of those. One that's coming off the books for the parks improvements this year. So here is some data on, from a budget perspective, how we do on our current net revenues. So this is the number, your current revenues minus current expenses. And look at this. In the last, this is 12 years. In only a single budget cycle, did we think we would generate more revenues than we would expend? So this is not something new. This is something that this organization has been dealing with for some time. Then in terms of actuals, how we've been doing when, at the end of the year when we know how things have ended up, the majority of years in the last 12, the actuals are, bad news. So every time you see a negative, de facto, we are utilizing reserve funds and our next year's beginning fund balance goes down. The years where we have some positives, that helped build our reserve during that period. But we have been relying on reserves to keep us going. It's not new in our reality. So let's see, we've only got about 10 minutes left. So this next piece is just about what our authorities are for being able to fund city services. This is a breakdown of our property tax. Right now, folks may know or not that with Measure 5, way back when, there is a limit in education funding of $5 and $10 in government, and before compression starts becoming a factor. So those are things to be thinking about. Options in Oregon. This is a list by the League of Oregon Cities of options, legal options. And vaping used to be on the list, but that became preempted by the state. And they do not give the city a share of that like they do for cigarettes. So just, that's a bummer. And a payroll tax, back in 2018 when this was made, no one had done a payroll tax, but the city of Eugene is in its first year of doing that. So that barrier has been broken. So, gosh, in the next 10 minutes, I'm not sure how far we'll be able to get here. The first thing is the roadmap. So just to give you a sense of, we're looking at trying to schedule about, kind of every month, a work session on this topic to be able to really get in there and talk about what our options are and what you would like staff to research for you as you consider different options to help deal with this resource gap that we're facing. Hopefully we will be able to make some choices by mid-fall. And the reason why that's important is because if we don't have choices about resource options that we'll be able to add to the table, add to what we do, our budget process for next year is going to be similar to the one that we've just come through, which, no one liked the result of what we were forced to cut in terms of keeping going. So that's a pretty aggressive timeline. So hopefully folks will be able to stay engaged during that. So I circled in your packet, so hopefully folks had a chance to look at, there were 7 proposed criteria, excuse me, to evaluate the options that we may choose from. So council policy goals. You know what, my voice is going. Jeff, do you mind? Sorry, jumping in.
I do not mind. Thanks, Jennifer. Council policy goals, making sure that we support or at least present an obstacle to other council goals, looking at the revenue raising capacity, the amount of funds likely to be generated, including service demand impacts associated with the revenue stream, looking at revenue stability, so that the reliability of the resource level under different conditions. Next slide. Issues related to household equity, either directly or indirectly serving to reduce or exacerbate structural historic inequities and how the city funds its services, healthy business climate, environmental impact, administrative effort, how expensive it is to implement and manage. And then, so I guess given the amount of time, perhaps with this issue, much as with the questions that Councillor Chenoweth talked about, if you could give us some initial feedback tonight, that would be great. If we don't have time to get through that feedback on this criteria, feel free to send something to Jennifer and or myself, and we can make sure that we respond and share that back to the committee. Does that make sense? Anybody want to weigh in on any of those issues right now?
I saw that in the proposed timeline about how this comes back to us, and I think just I will plan on and just sending questions and things in, but I feel like this is an important enough thing that it needs robust discussion at our level, and I don't know if there's a way to bring this back to us after you've gotten feedback and input prior to that next one that was on the roadmap, given the time constraints we have tonight of getting through this establishment material. But
sure.
I hate to miss good discussions on this stuff, and this seems like this could be rife for good discussions.
I take your point, and we've been sort of scouring your agendas to identify where there is space. I will just give you a little bit of a heads up. Your second meeting in July, your second regular meeting, looks like a pretty light agenda, and so we may find some of these issues we can bring back for you for sort of a process check or some interim discussion. And so we've been pretty diligent about looking at where we can find time. Councillor Chenoweth.
Yeah, just to add, I appreciate what. Thank you, Jeff, and I appreciate what Councillor Geary just said, and just to add kind of another point to that, It would be good when we do go to actually have robust discussion about this, if we could limit the amount of staff time that's being taken, because it makes it hard to try to punch in conversation. We need to get the information. I understand that, but we need to have enough time to actually discuss. And that would be very helpful.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that goes to my earlier sort of introductory comments. This first meeting is really heavy on information that really sets the stage for the rest of the work that can be done. And so we take your point for certain. Anything else on that issue before we sort of rip through the next few slides? So we have provided for you a variety of revenue alternatives that are being used in a number of communities. We've tried to create high-level categories for you to take a look at. And so in addition to looking at the principles, we would hope that you would study these areas of revenue options and some of the specific details, and then just give us sort of your initial take on sort of thumbs up or thumbs down. This is definitely worthy of conversation. So we really just want to introduce these next several slides to you tonight and not try to force the conversation tonight. Councilor Mackey?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yeah. Okay. I don't remember these particular slides. I remember most of what you've shown tonight, but not these. Could we get a copy of some of these?
Yes, these should be in your inbox, but we will make certain that this live version that we're showing you tonight is both part of the record on the website and you get it directly.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry to bother you, but I wanted to be sure.
That's fine.
And a little bit on the back end of that real quick, just to know what I need to be giving you input on and be effective. Do you want us to weigh in on these now, like in that we send you information? Do you want us to weigh in, or will that be something that comes back? You just want to go over this now, like line by line. Would you like our feedback in the meantime?
I think if you want to share your sort of individual initial reactions to these, we will compile them and then share them back with the whole group, so you can have a group discussion and try to come to some consensus. We expect there are way too many of these options for us to really reasonably analyze and bring forward. And if there's a strong sense of either areas that you think we should be looking at or we should not look at for any reason, we just want to winnow this list down before we start doing a sort of higher level of analysis and assessment to bring back to you for further study. So this is an initial exercise to sort of try to narrow the field, identify if there's some sort of key higher priorities. So I think this is part of an iterative process. So there's about 8 different tax options on this slide. Go to the next slide. On this option, there are a number of other kind of sales excise tax sort of options. Next slide. Fees for services, a variety of either direct benefit or general fees for services. Next slide. Existing resources that we already have in place that we could consider reprogramming to some extent. And then finally, next slide. Other sort of resource options that didn't fit necessarily cleanly into the other categories that are used in one or more communities around the area. The next several slides, I think, are examples of, actually we've got a community engagement conversation too. So much like the ARPA funds, we would presume that the council and the budget committee are primarily a key partner in the community engagement. Much like the ARPA list, once we get to a more narrow list of potential revenue sources, that may give us a path forward. We're going to presume that you want some robust public engagement and community engagement in this conversation as well. Fair to presume. Very good. If you want to quickly move to the budget process overview, Jennifer, and we could just sort of highlight that as work yet to be done by the group.
Yeah, so I'm going to stop sharing now because I don't have a slideshow for that. So so my understanding is that the council leadership has been talking about different options, and so I wonder whether someone would like to kind of give the group an update on where we're at on that.
I'll go ahead and just address, we've listened very carefully to council and the budget committee as we're going through the budget process for this upcoming year. And definitely we're looking at engaging at a more frequent level. We haven't talked about what that's going to look like. I can tell you, we've talked about that the budget discussion ought to be designed to be at least 2 evenings. It ought not to be one mammoth session that starts at 7 and goes to 11 or 12, but it ought to be more manageable. If we feel that that needs to be, 4-hour sessions for 2 nights, 3-hour sessions for 3 nights, we're looking at those types of things. We've heard you very clearly from that perspective. And again, much more to come. This tonight is just a good example of having more transparency with the budget committee and the council, talking much earlier in any process that we could get to a point where we could have better dialogue. But again, one aspect that we look at is, our council goals really drive the direction we're going, and that's where staff takes their cue from as to what programs and the costs they're going to have. And so again, we're working diligently on a more concrete budget process, engagement, a little longer process so that we can have, as Zach had, good dialogue as we go through some of those things. And so again, those are just a few things that we've talked about. Remy, any thoughts from your perspective or from Jeff? These are some of the individuals that we've been talking with. Remy?
Mr. Mayor, thank you for the opportunity. I think that we're just really diligently working through trying to have an informed process that's responsive at a policy level to the feedback that we're getting, and is mindful at the same time of not interceding in the budget process, in the sense that we don't want to stop work from happening in the committee that was designated to do that work, and with the city staff that was designated to do that work. So really nothing to add at this time. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
And Jeff, any thoughts that you might have as we're going through this? I can tell you one other piece that we've talked about is, again, we're so cautious and careful that once we set the direction as a council, then plans and the spending of money within departments fall on our department heads. And to micromanage the process once allocations have been made, we don't want to be doing that. We're not into the implementation, we're into the policy. And again, from my perspective, the way that we do that is a mindful, dedicated process to the goal process. So with that, Jeff, any concluding concerns there or comments?
No concern, just want to see if you're able to see the graphic that I put up on the screen.
Yeah, much more structure in the process that we're going to be going through. And again, that's come because we've had good dialogue about what we ought to be doing.
And we'll sort of share this graphic with the group and spend some time at one of our subsequent meetings sort of talking through this, so you've got a better understanding of what the process could look like, and give us some feedback on this idea.
Well, with that, our time is spent at 7 o'clock. Jennifer, thank you so very much for your diligence in putting all this material together. Not only the packet of information that had so much information there, but these slides are going to be things that I think each member of the council and the budget committee have an opportunity to look at. And as indicated, if we can get back to Jeff or Jennifer by Friday, any directions or concerns that come off of those guiding principles, please put the time into it so that we can engage in the process coming down the road. And so it is 7 o'clock right now. So I will go ahead and adjourn the joint work session this evening. Budget committee members, thank you so very much for being a part of that, our discussion tonight, and your partnershiping with us as we do the right things within the city structure. Thanks. We'll go now over to our Zoom call for city council. So we'll move very quickly. Thank you.
Recording in progress.
Oh, it was totally the first year. Oh, dang it. What do you get? Amanda, do you get any good Legos?
Not since I showed you the police station that I just got.
Did you finish that bad boy?
Oh yeah. I'm not sure if you noticed either that it had a little donut shop right next to it.
Oh, we were all over that, yeah. That seems problematic.
Stereotype. I don't even think I told you that my crown jewel is a 1981 Lego set that is a public works facility. I love that one.
Whoa. What do they got in there?
And they've got a couple.
A broom and a street sweeper?
We've got a couple garages and like a system to move materials with like a claw thing. It's pretty cool.
Oh man. That's pretty sweet. I'm gonna give you that book that chronicles like the Lego sets from when they started, and every year they have a different one. And every year the highlight would ask me, did you have that one when you were a kid? Did you have that one when you were a kid? Dude, I wasn't alive in 1932.
Well, it is 7:04, and again, I will go ahead and call the City Council meeting to order. The 13th day of July 2021. I'm having a little bit of connectivity problem, so if I should shut off my video to be able to hear, you'll know that I'm still there though. So I'll call on City Recorder Claudia. Could you do a roll call?
Councilor Geary. Counselor Geary,
Present, and a pleasure to see everyone.
Counselor Garvin,
Here.
Counselor Minke, Counselor Peralta,
Here.
Counselor Chenoweth,
Present.
Council President Drabkin,
Here.
and Mayor Hill.
Here. Thank you, Claudia. Zach, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance this evening?
Sure thing. I usually pull up the lyrics page, but I didn't this time. So of course you call on me. Wait for the flag. All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag, of the United States of America,
and to the
republic for which it stands, one nation, indivisible, under God,
indivisible,
with liberty and justice for all.
For all. Thank you, Zach.
If I messed up a word, my internet broke up. Must be it for a little bit there and switched me around.
We got it. Okay. This evening, our next item on the agenda is comments from our community members, and any interested audience member may give comments to the council. And if there's follow-up to be made off of those comments, we will assign that to a staff member. Any person can speak on a topic other than a matter in litigation, quasi-judicial land use matter, a matter scheduled for public hearing at a future date. Each comment will be limited to 3 minutes per person. You need to let Claudia know if you would like to speak. And so I'll turn to Claudia right now. Do we have anyone that would like to speak to the council this evening, Claudia?
Yes, we'll start with Tynan and Moesha Pierce via Zoom.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Hi. Second. Hi, I'm Michelle Pierce, Tynan's wife. I'm a naturopathic doctor here in town. And I just wanted to start by, there's two things I want to talk about. One is, I just want to start by defining camping. Many people have probably went camping this past week. Maybe you went with some friends or some family, went by some water, had some drinks, had a good time. What Chris Bean does is not camping. He is living. He is now houseless because McMinnville Police Department stole his house. We cannot make it illegal to exist. Humans need to sleep. They need to go to the bathroom. They need to eat, and they need community. Please help Chris Bean get his house and belongings back and drop the discriminatory fines for him and other community members for existing. That's my first comment. I also came here today, which is why I initially wanted to come here, was to talk about your Climate Action Plan Committee. I really want our city to be on the forefront of sustainability. This past year, we've dealt with fires and smoke, ice and power outages, and now a heat wave. I saw many patients who were very sick from the smoke. And this time around with the heat wave, it took volunteers to get safe shelters from this heat. And we saw how many people died in the state. It was like over 100 people. I'm curious why our high school is not offered up and why it takes volunteers instead of a city coordinated event to get these sort of things handled. I just feel like there's way too much red tape and that people's lives are at stake. I'm from Phoenix, Arizona, where it's very hot. I volunteered at Standing Rock. I took my girls to Flint, Michigan when there was a water crisis. My mother worked in water rights in Phoenix, Arizona for over 30 years. So I know a thing or two about the fragility in the environment. And there's just so much more we can do. And I would just love to be a part of this Climate Action Committee. I'd like to see it get started. And I just really want us to stop spending our time and money fighting people and put it towards helping them. So that's my comment today. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Claudia, next.
All right, next is me. So Tynan Pierce here. So I'm making comment around around Chris Bean's arrest and subsequent stealing of his home and also just the larger issues at stake here with how the city's handling camping ordinances and the fines and the police deployment, the repressive state apparatus that you choose to use in these sorts of situations instead of compassionate, caring, and creative solutions to help people. How does a $1,250, we're going to do the quotes around the presumptive fine because we're hoping that you eliminate that immediately, help anybody except for the police department and your funds? It doesn't help anybody. And then you're stealing someone's home. I mean, it's so outlandish that hopefully we don't even spend too much time on it, and that Chris gets his house back, there's no fine, and all the charges are dropped. So hopefully that gets handled. But especially with the fact that we have Martin v. Boise, we have Blake v. Grants Pass, we have these precedents set, and yet somehow McMinnville seems to be trying to find a way to wiggle around, and even HB 3115. It seems like you're trying to find a way around by like, oh, because it's 6:30 a.m., then you can't camp anymore. Oh, it's like, so you have to have like an alarm clock to like wake up and make sure you're out of this space that you're camping in illegally. The whole thing is just a mess. We know we don't have enough space for people. And I just feel sad that it seems like the city's taking one step forward, you know, the awesome funding for Project Turnkey, these great initiatives from the DEI committee, the Affordable Housing Committee. And then it's just like status quo BS again. Just like, what are you doing? It's so confusing. Like, why are both of those things happening? That should not be happening. We need other situations. If this worked, we spend more money in the United States on policing in our expenditures than anywhere else in the world. We're the most incarcerated country in the world. And we only rank 128th for public safety. So obviously this isn't working. Like, we need to try new things. And I understand that like wheels are turning, and I've been told they turn slowly. But obviously with the COVID experience over the past year and a half, we see that things can go fast when you choose to go fast. So maybe we could all just choose to go fast. And that's my comment for the night.
Thank you, Dan. Claudia, next.
Next, we have Valerie Miller.
Thank you. Welcome, Valerie.
Hey, been a long time, right?
It has.
Unfortunately, I was a witness to seeing Chris Bean being arrested. It was extremely traumatic for me to see 6 police officers and a code enforcement officer around his tent yelling his name over and over again. If I was on the street living in a tent because of my religious belief system, I would have to choose between observing Shabbat on Saturday or going to jail. If I worked a graveyard shift, which I did for a long time, and I lived in a tent on the street, I would have to choose between sleeping or not sleeping. And I think that's what pushes a lot of people into substance abuse, unfortunately, and then it's a downward spiral. It's also concerning to me that a fine for possessing dangerous drugs is $100. People are dying from those drugs on the street right now. I'm worried about people that I love. But if you get caught sleeping past 6:30 in the morning, which is completely unreasonable, you're facing jail time, and the taking of your possessions, which is all that you really have on the street. That's all he had. He worked really hard to get that. And he had a safe place to sleep from the elements. Not anymore. I think we really need to start evaluating what's reasonable when it comes to people that are homeless. Calling them campers is, I feel, derogatory, because nobody's doing it for fun. Nobody's doing it because it's a blast. It's just a tent is what you have sometimes. I was blessed because I live in an RV, but still I am facing worries from the city. I can't find housing. I would love to have a place to put my family that's reasonable, but I can't find it. So basically that's all I wanted to say. I think we really need to start this dialogue again, because it is traumatic to see that kind of action. For hours, those police officers stood around his tent until they could obtain a search warrant, which I don't even know what circuit court judge would do that, but a search warrant to pull him out. That I feel like is a total waste of our resources. Like a third of McMinnville's budget goes to the police department. I think more of that needs to go into behavioral health and helping people get a hand up. And I think the turnkey program, all those programs are super awesome. I'm glad they're going on for some people, but for some people like me, it wouldn't be, might not be suitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Valerie. Who do we have next?
Next, we have Jacob Miller.
Welcome, Jacob.
Thank you. Good evening, councilors, mayor. Good to see you guys. Not under the current circumstances. I too witnessed some things that happened with Chris Bean. I've got some concerns about, the logical fallacy, which is, in my mind, permitted camping versus, criminalizing homelessness. As Valerie brought up, we have a decriminalization of user amounts of drugs, for instance. People aren't going to jail for that. For somebody to be able to have a crime attached and go to jail for living and call it camping. So here's the logical fallacy. We've got a recreational activity. The state defined it that way. I didn't do it. And then we've got this thing that he's doing that looks like that recreational activity, except for it's still a life-sustaining activity. Same thing you might do while you're camping, a life-sustaining activity, except for when you're done camping, right, you go home, right, because you got a home to go to, right? When you're out of supplies, you're out of money, or the plan's over, that's where you go. It's done and over with. This life-sustaining activity we've talked about before. This life-sustaining activity shouldn't be called anything besides life-sustaining activity to try to skate around cruel and unusual punishment by criminalizing people doing things or having things to sustain life. Guys, I would like to really address this and get a handle on it before we end up breaking the tool or breaking the object being worked on, the people that are being worked with. They're using the wrong tool for the job. I just don't think it's going to cut it. It might be a way to, put fire underneath people, but it's not appropriate. It's cruel and unusual. It really is. When you get down to the nitty-gritty of it, that's not just my opinion. People that have far more knowledge than I in these matters have had a similar opinion. I don't think we should be doing this way. This is not a, hey, we permitted. It's like saying, hey, we permitted ethnic people to sit in the bus, just a certain area. It's equal, we permitted them to have these people to have a place to be during certain times, but they're excluded from these other places during these times. That's not equal. These people have certain rights and these people don't. These people can exercise them freely. These people can't. And around here, it looks like socioeconomic status is what gets you there. If you're of this stature down here, perceivably, you don't get to exercise those things. People try to control your functions. And when you have this other perception going on, or people have it, you can do those things. Two RVs I can show you that since this tow have had their stuff, not only their RVs out, but their pop-outs out. I mean, what's the deal? I'm not going to go and tell on my neighbor over that. It's not a big deal. I'm not going to do that. The idea that we're going to use these type of tactics, which really it's applied discrimination. We've got arbitrary enforcement, not going after everybody equally, and applied discrimination, right? And then now Chris Bean's property gone. I'd really like to see him get his property back without having to see a big fine or big court fiascos. And hopefully that's not my timer. And I also want to thank you guys for those of you that are doing everything that you can and doing it righteously. Thank you. Any comments that seem that are derogatory are not meant for you. It's for people that have a conscience in the other direction. People that might have their conscience pricked towards these actions. It's time to repent, guys. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Claudia, do we have any others?
Yes. Next, we have Chris Beam here.
Welcome, Chris.
Everybody. I appreciate the time to maybe sit and have a word, maybe kind of explain, not necessarily what I'd like to have happen, because I don't necessarily know the procedures. I don't know the you know, the lawful action that's supposed to happen after something like this. You know, I just know that you know, in my gut and you know, in my heart, that something is wrong here. You know, I've been clean and sober for 6 months. You know, I've been staying out of trouble. I haven't been committing crime. You know, I've been part of the workforce, like paying taxes. And the only thing that I'm lacking, right, is housing. The only thing that I'm lacking is the ability to be indoors. You know, so I try to remedy that with, you know, a tent trailer. And it might not be pretty, and it might not be, you know, some people even think it's unsafe for me to park my trailer in the spots that, you know, the officers say that I can put my trailer. But it's a home, you know, and it's a place that I can go where I can shut myself out from the world. You know, it's a place that I can be where I'm not going to have, you know, people sitting right next to me using drugs, you know what I mean? Because that's a real, like, sensitive situation for me, you know? I choose not to use today because I know it's not a solution. I choose not to use today because I know it just goes downhill from there. And when and Chris being on drugs is a Chris being that cannot do any good. You know what I mean? And if I want to do good and I want to find remedy for this situation, I know I have to do it sober. So when I'm doing all these things right, or perceivably I'm doing all these things right, and I get dragged out of my trailer, arrested, and have all my possessions confiscated, you know, it makes me feel defeated. You know, makes me question what's right and wrong, whether I'm guilty for trying to live on the side of the road, you know, whether these, like it's been said, life-sustaining activities are really what I'm supposed to be doing, or should I just go back out and go do some drugs because it seems like, you know, that's the easier option. That's what people get away with nowadays. And you know, if I want to get a fine for sleeping or doing drugs, you know, like realistically, it's $100 fine for the drugs and it's a $1,250 fine for the sleeping. You know, but I have to sleep in order to go to work, and I have to sleep to get up and try to, you know, further my life. You know what I mean? It's just something that we have to do every day, all of us. We have to sleep every night. So when they took my trailer, what did I continue doing? I just continued to sleep. But this, instead of, you know, in my bed, in my trailer, I have to sleep on the sidewalk.
5 more seconds, Chris.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you for coming before us this evening. Claudia, any other comments this evening?
Yes, next we have Summer Hatfield.
Summer, welcome.
Thank you. So my family and I and neighbors are here tonight to request that a radar speed sign be put near the intersection of 9th and Evans in Northeast McMinnville. This is a residential area where there are a lot of families who have children and pets, and there's often kids jogging near there because the high school is really close to there. And many residents in this area have voiced concerns for safety in crossing at this particular intersection, or for even walking up and down near the bike paths right there. And this is because there are a lot of people continually going over the speed limit in that area, and it's a real safety concern. I know personally I've experienced trying to cross the street and almost being hit by somebody who was speeding, presumably because they couldn't see me because they were going so fast. And last year, my brother, in the same intersection, he lost a dog when the dog was run over by a speeding truck right in that intersection. It was in the middle of the night, and I just can't even imagine, you know, the pain that my father felt watching his son curled up in fetal position in the rain, crying next to what was left of this dog in the street, and then having to clean it up. And you know, maybe if the truck had been alerted to how fast it was going and slowed down, it could have seen the dog and possibly stopped in time to not hit it. Let's see, sorry, I took some notes. Having a radar speed sign in that area, it's a proven traffic calming solution with real results. Statistics show that speeders will slow down up to 80% of the time if they're alerted to their speed. And slowing down will increase the likelihood that a victim would survive should an accident occur. We know that a vehicle traveling at 20 miles an hour, if somebody was hit by that vehicle, they'd have a 9 out of 10 chance of surviving. But if you raise that speed to 40 miles per hour, then the chance goes down to a 1 in 10 chance of surviving. And in addition to the safety aspects of having a radar speed sign right there, there's also, a lot of the psychological and mental health aspects of hearing cars accelerate and noise pollution from all those cars in that area, because there's a large strip right there where there isn't any sort of speed control on that section of Evans Street. And there's also the issue of environmental pollution, with people accelerating. So the only arguments that I've heard against putting some type of speed control right there would be the cost, and then also the ability for emergency vehicles to travel up and down that street quickly. And as far as cost, the radar speed signs are relatively low in cost, especially when you consider the maintenance fees, which would be, I think I read a statistic that was like only about $150 over 45 minutes. Is that my time? Okay. Well, thank you for your time.
Thank you, Summer.
Next, we have Linda Hatfield. She also provided some written statements, so I will make that part of the record as well.
Welcome, Linda.
Thank you. We live on Evans Street, where there's 4 blocks with no stop signs, as my daughter said. People drive on the street going over the speed limit. Little sports cars and trucks with their loud mufflers sound off directly in front of our house all the time. In fact, they'll just sit there and look directly at us and then speed off and making louder noises. We've been to the police department several times, but they keep saying they will put a speed radar out, but they haven't yet. And I went around the neighborhood and I got a petition signed from about 150 people. I gave it to the city planning commissioner and nothing was done. He did come out and he stood for about 10 minutes and he said he didn't see a problem. We are sick and tired of it and we're at our wits' ends. And we've seen people pass cars on this street on the double yellow lines right in front of our home. We've had dogs hit, people in wheelchairs almost hit, and families with small children almost get hit. A lot of families are riding their bikes with these small children, and there's been 2 wrecks right directly in front of our home. Students, I assume from the track team at the high school run up and down the street, and they run right in the street, and vehicles don't slow down for them either. And my husband said one day on our porch, and 63 cars passed our house within 10 minutes. There's too much traffic for a 25-mile-an-hour street. And it's not unusual to see at least 3 or 4 times a day vehicles speeding 50 to 60 miles an hour or more. And we're afraid someone is really going to get hurt. We saw a truck yesterday pulling a large camper coming down the street about 50 miles an hour. If there would have been someone crossing the street, they would have never been able to stop for them. If the city could install video cameras like they have in Sherwood, I'm sure they're going to make a lot of money. They'd be rich. And I don't know what the answer is, but we've come to complain. I have about 27 people that have written to me, and I gave her the thing. One of them was Kathleen Booth from Chewig Farms, and she was one of the people who almost got hit in front of the community center. Fortunately, some bystanders got the license plate, and she was in the crosswalk, and a car stopped to let her go by, and the idiot behind her pulled out right and ran right through the sidewalk crossing. And I've seen this several times on our street also. And Mohan, he lives on Fellows Street, and he said it's just like a raceway. I do appreciate that the city put up the new speed limit signs, but maybe we need speed bumps, he says. I have Scott Moore from Mac Cyrus. Get video with sounds, even if it's just on your phone. I can hear them coming 6 blocks away, especially the—
Linda, you have 5 more seconds.
Okay. Anyway, the cars are weaving in and out, going about 60 to 70 miles an hour in the 45-mile-an-hour zone by the hospital. And they jumped in the McMinnville exit, cutting off one car. Anyway, it just—
Linda, your 3 minutes are up. Thank you for your testimony this evening.
Thank you.
Next
Claudia?
Next we have David Hatfield.
Okay, David?
I want to basically address the same issues. I live on Evans Street also. My wife and I just decided 8 years ago that we wanted to retire in McMinnville because we wanted a peaceful, nice, quiet city. At this point, our particular street is anything but that. As was said before, we have vehicles coming up to that street, mostly kids in these hot rod cars. We have people in the big pickup trucks with the big tires roaring up through there. And it presents a very real safety hazard. We've had wrecks, we've had dogs killed, we've had people nearly killed all the time. It doesn't happen only on Evans Street, but it's happening all over town. But on our particular street, it affects us. There's businesses up there, bed and breakfast, churches who are concerned about their safety. And I want to specifically zero in on 12th and Evans. Everywhere else along Evans Street, there's particular stop signs, stop lights. Between 8th Street and 12th Street, there is no stop signs. And we had somebody come up there one day and stand there at 10 o'clock in the morning for 20 minutes when everybody had gone to work and doing whatever they do, and tell us that obviously there's no speeding problem. Well, he should live there 24/7 like all of us do on Evans Street. And what they're doing at 8th Street, it gives them a virtual drag strip freeway for 4 blocks, and they use it exactly like that. And I would absolutely love to see it. I think it's critical that there is a stop sign on 10th Street. That would make every 2 blocks a stop sign. And I think it's critical. And I want to, if I have to beg for a stop sign, that's what I'll do, because there's a lot of concern up there. So, and I appreciate your consideration. Thank you.
Thank you, David.
You bet.
Claudia?
Next we have Leonard Odell.
Leonard, welcome.
Hello. I will give you a rare surprise, and thank you for placing a stop sign at 9th and Galloway. It has made a significant improvement in the neighborhood for safety. I've lived there since the mid-90s. We have multiple friends that live on Evans Street, and we've witnessed some of the bad behavior of the drivers. At least 2/3 of the drivers are reasonable in their speed, but the ones who exceed the speed limit tend to be quite egregious in their behavior, some purposely doing it just to annoy the neighbors that complain. And some of these people live only 3 blocks over, yet they do it all the time, purposely with the big truck. We personally walk our dog and grandchildren past that spot, crossing the street every day. And we've had multiple occasions over the years where people have come close to hitting us or children or an animal when we clearly have the right of way. They feel it's an imposition to slow down as they approach the downtown area. The traffic seems to be more egregious as it goes downtown than it does of leaving it. We just would like it to be safer. If you could put a traffic flow control of some sort, speed bump, stop sign, anything would be helpful. As some of these people, they purposely do it. And that's about it.
Thank you, Leonard. Claudia?
That was it, Mayor and Council.
Thank you, Claudia, and thanks to those that addressed the council this evening. That will now take us to our presentations this evening. We have a presentation of the Turtle Dove group, and we'll call on John Mead, who will be on Zoom, and then we have Patrick Evans and Dawson Tarnaran to present. So I'll turn it over to John. Good to see you, sir. Sounds like you're muted. There you go.
Hello, Mr. Mayor, Madam President of the Council, and esteemed councilors, friends and colleagues. Thank you for having us here tonight. We wanted to talk a little bit about the Turtle Dove project here in McMinnville. It's a positive step that's taking place and seen some results, and I also wanted to connect in with the city and its programs, and there are many different reasons for homelessness, and I think it's fitting that there's many different solutions in our community and different programs and organizations working towards helping, and Turtle Dove is one of those, and we fit a certain niche. Claudia, are you able to present our PowerPoint for us, or is that something that we need to share our screen?
Patrick, I need you and Dawson co-host to share your screen.
Okay. Are we able to pull up the PowerPoint? We'll pull up the PowerPoint. I'll just keep talking while Pat opens up the PowerPoint presentation. We'll share that. Possibly. So Turtle Dove Shelters was started in May of 2020 and incorporated in August of 2020. It's created by Yamhill County concerned citizens to provide temporary shelter for homeless individuals through portable and semi-permanent shelters. So many of you have seen the shelters around town. They are the bicycle trailers that look a bit like a recreational trailer, but downscaled for individual sleeping pods. So they are lightweight, low-cost solutions that Turtle Dove organization is able to deploy rapidly, and is putting out about one shelter every week for use for the homeless. $500 is about the cost of the materials, and all of the labor is provided by Lee Eggers of McMinnville in his garage, who's lived in McMinnville for 18 years, veteran. He and Pat Evans are really the two driving forces behind the Turtle Dove project, and I've been fortunate to join them as an advocate for the Turtle Dove organization and as an advocate for the homeless. So that's a little bit about what we're here to discuss. And I guess one bit of perspective that I wanted to bring up and share with my background being on the city budget committee and thinking about the future of our town. Who in this Zoom meeting thinks that our homeless population is going to remain steady? over the next 5 years. Our research suggests, and I think a lot of people see the trends that have been causing homeless are continuing, and in 5 years from now, there's going to be a homeless population that's much larger than our population is now. So thinking about our approach and how we provide for the homeless and how we police the homeless, we need to think about our approaches and be ready to address the future needs and not just acting on what's happening today. So with that, I'm going to turn over to Pat Evans, who's really the driving force, one of the driving forces behind Turtle Doves, to talk about some of his experiences with the Turtle Dove Project.
Thank you, John.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, city councilors. Just a little bit of background. In the 80s and early 90s, I was involved with the homeless projects in the city of Portland. I was the director of housing for Central City Concern. At that time, we had about 1,100 single room occupancy beds in the city of Portland. And we didn't have a homeless problem at that point in time. We had Baloney Joes that did feeding, but we had a place for virtually everybody to sleep, which was good until everybody decided it was a great idea to create condos for yuppies and the millennials in the so-called Chinatown. Once all that building was done, lo and behold, we had a homeless problem in Portland. I've now lived in McMinnville for about 10 years, and I'd like to share with you a couple of the observations that I've had working with the homeless over the period of time that I was with Central City Concern and Northeast Community Development. I was really pleased to see that the county and the city and everyone has come together to purchase the Motel 6. What I want to do is caution everyone that one size does not fit all for the homeless. There are many, many different reasons people find themselves homeless. One is that they just don't have enough money to pay for available housing. There's also another large subset of primarily women who are victims of domestic violence. They need to get out of the house, preserve their lives and their children's lives, and they wind up homeless. There are people that are substance abusers, and they use substance abuse as a means to deal with mental illness or other trauma. There's another population, post-traumatic stress disorder. You don't have to be a veteran to have PTSD, but you do have to be raised in an environment where abuse is the norm. And there are a lot of people that fall into that category. And there's another large category of people who are mentally ill. In a prior life, I worked for New York State Medicaid. I was an associate commissioner. And our budgetary process in New York decided that people could be cured by taking their medications, which was great until they stopped taking their medications. And then we had a problem. So I guess what I'm saying at this point in time is I'd like everyone to be very cautious that the recent influx of money for either a navigation center or for Motel 6 is going to solve the problem, because one size absolutely does not fit all. Yes, there are shelters here in town, or there is a shelter here in town, but many of the homeless that I have dealt with here in McMinnville don't like the restrictive atmosphere. They're not able to be clean and sober. And as a result, they don't have the ability to access that shelter. And then the only other shelters that are available are First Baptist when the weather is bad. Again, one size does not fit all. What we did, we copied a shelter that was built by one of our local residents, Ed Doty. And Ed is a veteran of the Navy and the Marine Corps, found himself homeless, built himself a shelter, he and one of his friends. And we thought we could possibly take that and improve on it. So we started out last year with Ed, Lee Eggers, and myself. All of us are veterans. We probably have a total of 25 to 30 years of service in the military. We gave out our first shelters on July 3rd, and we've given out in excess of 25 shelters so far. And they, by the way, work well in the worst of the weather. We had our snowstorm. The folks that I talked to that had turtle dove shelters and a good sleeping bag made it out just fine. We don't think that the turtle dove shelter is the cure to homelessness. We think it's a stepping stone. It's a way to give people a home while they are making the transition with the help of the county and the city back into the workforce or into a permanent housing project. So I guess what we need to do is to make certain that everyone recognizes that that this approach is not going to be the cure, but it is one step toward reintegration. One of the things that we can't do is we can't provide social services because none of us are qualified to do that. And we can't guarantee that people who receive the turtle dove shelters will take good care of their shelter or even the area in which they park it. So we really do recognize our own limitations. And I think it's important that the people who see these shelters recognize we're trying to get that first step going for people. It will work for some, it may not work for all. But we also believe that these turtle dove shelters are a first step. And we point the city and city staff to the Conestoga Hut program that was developed in the city of Eugene. This has worked, and it has worked very, very well. The one thing that we're missing here in McMinnville is a safe location for people to either have a Conestoga hut, to have a turtle dove shelter, or to have a tent. As many of the prior speakers from the community have mentioned, the right to exist is a fundamental right guaranteed by the Constitution. It didn't establish categories of homelessness. It didn't establish, well, you can do this up until this point in time. I think we need to be very careful, and we need to be very supportive and try to create those safe locations, not just one, but perhaps many of them, so that we don't have a huge critical mass of camping and tents and trailers and Conestoga huts. But I think with a little careful planning and cooperation, we can solve this problem. Eugene has solved the problem. Walla Walla solved the problem. Olympia and Tacoma have solved the problem. I think McMinnville could solve the problem too if we just decide to work together on this creatively. And I'll turn this back over to John.
Thank you. So our next slide, if you advance, is just some thoughts that we have on, where do the homeless need your help, city councilors in the area of policy in the city. Providing safe and secure locations or new parking areas where the homeless can park safely overnight without harassment, and clearly stating those areas to the homeless population, citizens, and businesses so that is well understood. And actively supporting the provision of the portable, semi-permanent, and permanent homes for the homeless who desire such a lifestyle in McMinnville. And, I think we say that with a realism, understanding that nobody wants to go back to the days where there were very messy encampments that that created really a backlash against the city and against the homeless. And I don't think anybody thinks that situation served the homeless well long term. And the backlash has certainly been felt and certainly been heard. And in our opinion, the pendulum needs to swing back a bit more towards the compassionate consideration that also has a voice in our community. So considering exploring with partners whether McMinnville could support a health resources and federally recognized health center to enact crisis response teams similar to Cahoots. So I think there's a lot of fans of Cahoots out of Eugene, and looking into the funds. The Whiteberg Clinic is a HRSA health care center that receives federal grants and Medicare, Medicaid. And so could we incorporate that model into the navigation center and actually activate some federal funding for building and running that navigation center? I think that is worth exploring. Provide increased public restrooms and sanitation facilities available to the homeless so that normal biological needs are not categorized as offenses. That's a tough one, knowing that, public restrooms are often misused and high maintenance, but it's also just basic reality that people are going to need to use the restroom. And in the middle of the night, there's not always businesses that are open for them to go to and use those facilities. We'd like this to hopefully be a dialogue with the city council, and we would like to help fit into the fabric of the city and the portfolio of services and in the city of McMinnville and the nonprofit community in the area, and appreciate all of your support.
Thank you, John and Patrick. Any questions from the council for John or Patrick at this point?
I have a question, if I may.
Go ahead, Zach.
If folks hear this or we know of and would be good allies or support the mission, how could we point them towards you guys to get involved if that's something you're seeking or accepting, or how could people help either with their time, effort, or energies or resources?
Well, unfortunately, our assembly line consists of our garages. We don't really have a building or anything that we can bring people to assist at this point in time. We hope that as we're able, with the city's help, to migrate to the Conestoga hut model, that we will expand the ability to bring in volunteers who like to do woodworking and who are interested in this. In the meantime, the best thing we can hope for is that if people want to support the work that we're doing, if they feel that they're able to make a financial contribution, we are a 501c3. We will use every penny and then some to create more turtle dove shelters. And as I say, hopefully, as soon as we're able to start doing Conestoga huts, those will run about $2,000 a piece. So it will move from being moderately money intensive to wildly money intensive, hopefully. And I think that will be a good thing.
Copy that. Thanks.
Any other questions? Well, again, John, Patrick, and Dawson, thank you for your informative discussion tonight. I think, maybe through our Affordable Housing Committee and individuals that would reach out to you, we can talk a little more about those partnerships, as we, as we're going through the budget process, these are difficult times. We're very excited about Project Turnkey. And as Patrick indicated, you know, the nice thing about Project Turnkey is we're going to have administrators. YCAP is going to help administrate that program. It's under the direction of Providence Health Center. And we have had a track record through the county of the motel program that is transitioning 75% of those participating in this type of a program into permanent housing. And those are good things that we talk about. And so I think there's a place for all of us to work together on this. And so we'll follow up with you on that. But thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your great work. Thanks, you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next this evening, we have our advice and information. And so I'm just going to kind of go, Adam, if you'd like to go first this evening.
Nothing to report tonight, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Chris?
I'll keep it short and sweet. Nothing here either.
Thank you. Let's go with Zach.
Same report for me. Thanks.
Okay. Let's go with Sal.
Sal, I think you're muted.
Also my first time on Zoom. What can I say? The rental property inspection program met at the end of last month. We made pretty good progress towards a proposal to bring to council. The main issues we worked on were the kinds of rental properties that might be subject to an active form of inspection, the scope of what would be evaluated, and a funding mechanism to pay for the work. I felt pretty good about the movement that we had in the committee last week. No report for Council of Governments.
Thank you, Sal. Let's go to Kelly.
I'm going to briefly report on Visit McMinnville. I think some of you have received this information, but it's always nice to just give you a little bit of an update for everybody. Visit McMinnville is supporting Evergreen Aviation and Space Museum by commissioning new photography and videography of the destination asset to amplify their 20th anniversary. And I might add, Visit McMinnville is very happy because life has returned to McMinnville and hotels are full and things are going well. Visit McMinnville participated in on-site activations promoting the Willamette Valley as a premier visitor destination at several Seattle area farmers markets, and attendees received follow-up advertising and encouraging booking. Visit McMinnville secured several level national media guests to visit the town during July and August. Visit McMinnville is continuing to target consumer audiences most likely to visit McMinnville by showcasing advertising via print, video, digital, out-of-home, billboards, and radio. These ads are highly striking pieces that are highlight safe, fun, and aspirational McMinnville activities. And finally, Visit McMinnville, along with the Committee for Public Art, will help select the final artist to create a mural on the YCHA building on 3rd Street. The mural will be completed by the end of August 2020. That's all.
Thank you, Kelly. Let's go ahead and Remy.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I was just looking up my notes here. We had a meeting of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee. We had a report on Wine Country Pride, which I supplied, and I'll supply to this council as well. The results of Wine Country Pride, in addition to the events that went on, fundraising efforts are going to be supplying scholarships to every high school in Yamhill County. Additionally, we added 4 books to every public school in collaboration with PFLAG Newburgh. And those 4 books either featured queer characters or were written by queer authors. Newburgh was able to have a public art installation in their library as well. And we distributed over 350 Progress Pride flags throughout Yamhill County for a lot of the robust displays, which I'm sure you all saw downtown. In addition, we ran our Rainbow Quest program, and that we don't have all the numbers in yet, so I can't tell you exactly, but I can tell you that that fundraising effort ended up driving tens of thousands of dollars into our local economy. Our average cost that a venue was charging for a Pride drink was about $10. And again, we're still working on our exact numbers, but with them donating $1 back from every drink, we had some venues send in donations above $1,300 each. And so, you know, very few of these venues were just serving up one Pride-inspired beer. Most of the people that were purchasing those were also getting meals. They had other people with them getting drinks. They left tips. So I'm really excited to get more specific data on that and be able to come back and have a more exact number on how many tens of thousands of dollars Rainbow Quest put into our local economy, but it's significant, right as businesses were reopening. So a lot of successes around that in many ways. We also had a presentation from our library director. So as I've mentioned in here previously, the DEIAC is meeting with every department head to understand what those departments are currently doing in terms of equity and what they would like to do. And so it's a fairly robust learning process, and it's quite wonderful. And I encourage as many counselors as can attend before well, it's already public noticed, so it should be fine, right? So I encourage counselors to attend to really get an inside view of what's happening within each of these departments. And every meeting we'll be having another department head come in as a guest. So that's what we did at DEIAC. And the only other thing I have to report is in my work with the Oregon Wine Board, I have 2 commitments this week. Tomorrow I'm presenting to the Washington State Wine Commission. I'm doing a webinar on how the wine industry can move from racism to anti-racism. And then on Thursday, I'll be moderating a statewide forum for the Oregon Wine Board and regional marketing associations. I'll let you know how it goes.
Congratulations and best of on your presentations, Remy. For myself, MURAC, we canceled our meeting this month. We canceled our MWAC meeting and transportation this month. Thursday, we are going to have our Newburgh-Dundee bypass meeting. And just again, you know, I've been in so many meetings, I don't know where I tell the happy news, but the bypass, the allocation that the governor gave to the bypass of $32 million was approved by the legislative arm. And so we have $32 million. The U.S. House of Representatives, our $8 million that was brought up from Congresswoman Bonamici was approved by the House and the Transportation and Infrastructure Committee. And so many opportunities, and we were one of those that was successful. It needs now to go to the Senate, but it's feeling comfortable that it will go through there. And if that does, Senator Wyden's bill for $2 million would possibly go through. So we're looking at possibly $42 million outside of the regular funding for the bypass for phase 2, and specifically looking at the interchange at 219. So some good things there. We'll have an update this coming Thursday. Okay, with that, let's move over to our department heads, and I'll just kind of take a look. Amanda, I've got you up first.
Thank you, Mayor. Nothing to report tonight.
Thank you. Let's go over to Looks like Susan.
Hi, Mayor. Hi, Council. I have a couple of announcements for you. One, we're getting a lot of questions about when the senior center will be reopening. We're currently hiring for some staff there, so if you know of anybody, please point them to our webpage. We hope on announcing a date very soon. As I've mentioned before, it's difficult to hire people right now. We're just not getting a lot of applicants, but we hope to have a date soon, and I'll let you know when that is. We're also getting some inquiries about Kids on the Block. And as I've reported previously, we're making a lot of progress on that with the partnership with McMinnville School District and Campfire Columbia and Kids on the Block. We hope to announce something about registration next week on that, and I'll be sure and loop you in on that communication as well. MacPac has developed a finance subcommittee, and they're digging into both capital forecast projections as well as ongoing. And you might remember we have a budget committee member who has volunteered to be on that. Meredith Maxfield also sits on the finance subcommittee at MacPac. And then super exciting news, the Summer Fun program, which was funded partially through a grant. There's a band, Palente, right now playing over at the city park. I'm getting reports that there's over 200 people over there right now. So our community is bouncing back well. I hope tomorrow to see some of you at 2:00 for our Wednesdays at Wortman program. We have Emmy Blue and the Squatchy coming, so wear your best rainbow gear and come hear stories about the Pacific Northwest forest creatures. We also have Art in the Park tomorrow night at 6 p.m. at City Park. This one's going to involve chalk art. And then Friday, coolest thing ever, we are showing Big Hero at 6 at Joe Dancer. If you didn't make it out for our first movie out there, this is some of the new equipment that we bought with the first round of ARRA money, and it's really, we're getting a lot of great turnout. It turns out some of these programs that we've been planning for the summer are getting more than 200 people a day through them. So we're really pleased to see the community coming out for these free events.
Thank you, Susan, for that report. And success is we're getting Parks and Rec up and going again. So thank you. Let's go over to Heather Richards. Heather?
Good evening, Mayor and Councilors. Nothing to report tonight.
Thank you. Let's go over to Jennifer. Good to have you on the call again. You did a really good job of going over a lot of material earlier this evening.
Well, yeah, I really look forward to digging in with you guys and members of the Budget Committee in this series of meetings. I'm really excited about the opportunity. I did want to mention a couple of things, though. There was a clerical error in Resolution 2021-46 for the record. That was our city budget adoption resolution. I missed updating a couple of data points from the prior year, so we got those taken care of, but I just wanted to let people know that that change was made to the document to correct the clerical error. And then also, just so much fun happening around the finance office. The auditors are in next week for interim testing, or virtually in. So we begin that cycle very, very shortly. So, and that is all for my report. Thanks.
Thank you, Jennifer. Let's go to Kylie. Kylie?
Hi there. It's been a minute since I've seen you all. Good to be back. Just a couple little updates. Our Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Advisory Committee, Council President Dreb can give a nice update. I wanted to just tack on to that there's a community outreach subcommittee that will be looking at different public engagement strategies for the ARP dollars, really in all of the things that we talked about during the work session. So that group is hopefully convening in the next 2 weeks to take a look at that and provide some recommendations. And then also our furlough program is about halfway done. I've done a little bit of preliminary analysis, and I'm happy to report that all of our employees are kind of right on track with what we've asked them to do. So that program is still off and running, and it's running much more smoothly now that we're about halfway through it. And that's all I've got.
Thank you, Kylie. Scott Burke.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor and Council. Nothing at this time tonight.
Thank you. Let's go to the city, the Civic Center. Is either of the chiefs there this evening?
I show up.
Hi, Chief.
Sorry. I got the giggles. I promise to stop. Okay. Mayor, member of the councils, thanks. Just a couple quick heads up. The PD is open for business. We're wide open. Our front office is no longer restricted. So just a heads up, if you want to come visit me, I'm open for you. Real quick, I want to give an update about the Park Ranger program. I know I reached out to Sergeant Willis today, who supervises that team, to give you a quick update. As Director Muir pointed out, things are bustling in the parks, and he had made mention that our park rangers are in there, and they have noticed not a ton of problems at all. In fact, there are only 3 or 4 people that have been excluded all summer thus far. So it appears as though people are minding their P's and Q's, so to speak. So good news with that. In addition to that, the Rangers, as you know, are ambassadors downtown, with downtown dining being a major event taking place Friday through the weekend. I've asked them, after Mr. Towery reminded me that downtown is a no smoking corridor, and we have sent communication to them to make sure that if we have people that are smoking downtown, that is an ordinance and a reminder that they cannot be doing so. And excuse me, lastly, Mr. Tower asked me to hit on something. Our crime response unit has been deployed for all of a week starting tomorrow, and they've had some success. And to your point, I know you heard from the Hatfields tonight. I had a quick conversation with them out in the hallway about that. And with this team, the flexibility and the nimbleness, as I say, to get them deployed rather quickly, they will be spending some time in those neighborhoods tomorrow, specifically looking at speed enforcement in the area at 9th and Evans, between 12th and 8th specifically. So that is one of the real benefits of having these 2 officers now, and in August there'll be 4 that have been pulled from patrol to work on these types of livability issues, is that we could be fairly responsive to them. And my hope is that I've said to the News Register, to Mr. D'Aquilante during my statement, is that we have a unique ability right now to really work on some livability issues related to traffic enforcement, working on chronic nuisance houses, nuisance area drug crimes, that sort of things, city ordinance violations, as I like to call them, porch pirates, people that are going out and stealing packages from Amazon or whatever's been delivered to the house. So right now, they had some early on success with some directed enforcement on Michael Book with respect to some traffic issues that we're getting, as well as 19th and Shirley Ann Drive. These are things that we commonly get. I mean, I'm probably preaching to the choir, as you guys know, that you get these complaints from the citizens on an ongoing basis about traffic issues or chronic problems in a neighborhood. This team has been specifically put together to go out and proactively contact those residents that are experiencing these issues in their neighborhoods, in hopes of, 1, making sure that we're providing them proper service, and 2, that they see us out there, because our patrol staff might not have the time to stay and talk with a number of neighbors. These folks will have that time to go back and follow up and do whatever is necessary to ensure that the community knows that we are out and about and that we're looking to help them. So that's my report for this evening, and sorry for the giggles early on, but if you've got any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for the chief? Thank you, Chief, for that report. I know a number of the counselors were interested in the task force and how they're doing. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, Chief, it's good to see you.
Mr. Mayor and councilors.
And I know where Matt got the giggles, okay? It came from you.
I'm certain I would get blamed for it in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor and councilors, one of the things I just wanted to touch base on, our consultant, ESCI, has scheduled they have made a scheduled appointment with the city council in the work session on the 16th. So they will be here presenting information on the standards of cover document that they've been working on, and also trying to re-engage our partners after our last meeting that wasn't as much of a success because of the miscommunication during the transition of the project managers. So they're going to re-engage our partners, present the SOC work, standards of cover work, which will document and demonstrate the resource needs for the new district and the potential new district areas, as well as take a deeper dive into some of the finances to help council make informed decisions as we move forward on partnerships and successful partnership potentials for the districting option for the fire department.
Thank you, Chief. And let's go over to Jeff, Mr. Towery.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Just two brief related items to report. This Friday, the Mid-Willamette Valley Council of Governments will be hosting an in-person meeting of city managers and administrators to talk specifically about the federal ARPA funds, with a particular eye towards the opportunity for regional collaboration and leveraging partnerships. I'll be attending that meeting, and so I will be furloughing on Thursday this week. That's all I have. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Jeff. Council, I'll make mention of our May 2021 cash and investment report, which is a part of our packet. This evening, our consent agenda consists of the April 28th, 2020 City Council regular meeting and the minutes from the May 12th, 2020 regular City Council meetings. Is there anyone that would like to have any of these minutes taken off of the consent agenda this evening?
No, but since I wasn't present, I'd like to abstain.
Okay. Then let's go ahead. I'll ask for a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved by Kelly and seconded by Sal. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The consent agenda passes unanimously this evening, 5-0. This evening, we have a resolution number 2021-47, a resolution of the City of McMinnville, Oregon, ratifying the declaration of state of emergency concerning the collection, disposal, and general management of solid waste. So I'll call on our city attorney, Amanda Guile-Hinman, to present. Amanda?
Thank you, Mayor and councilors. Amanda Guile-Hinman, city attorney, and I also have Carl Peters available if the council has any questions for this resolution. To start off, this resolution regarding the declaration of state of emergency does not have to do with the collection services of McMinnville residents and those solid waste ending up at Coffin Butte. This is about the Recology's transfer station that's located in McMinnville and the conditional use permit that's tied to Recology's transfer station. So as the council may be aware, Riverbend landfill informed Recology that it was no longer going to be accepting municipal solid waste. It notified Recology on June 17th, saying that would become effective on June 19th. So very quick turnaround for that change in operations, which left Recology in a position where it was going to impact its operations and potentially be in violation of our conditional use permit. Now, we expect this to be temporary as area partners along with us work with both Recology, Riverbend, and DEQ to work through these issues. And so what we're looking at doing is, because of the public health and safety considerations that could be at play here with the impact to Recology's transfer station, to have a state of emergency in place until this issue is resolved, which we expect to happen over the next 3 months, and to allow us to be more nimble in dealing with the conditional use permit and the conditions of approval that are tied to that. And so if there's questions, I'll refer you to the packet. It has both my staff report as well as Recology's letter that outlines some of the conditions of approval that are affected by this change in operations. And then I would also invite the council to ask any questions of Recology to the extent they have any.
Thank you, Amanda. Let's go ahead and open it up for any questions of Amanda or Carl or any comments that you might have. Kelly?
I think I read it, but are you still able to take McMinnville personal dumping stuff over there till the end of the month? Is that still allowed or no?
If you're talking about, well, first, Council, Mayor, and staff, thank you for the opportunity to be here. Should always do that, be kind. If you're talking about over at Riverbend Landfill, no. As of July 1, they're not accepting any of that material at that facility.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Any other questions?
I don't have a question. I would just say, Mr. Peters, as a frequent user for business and as well as recycling, you guys managed the change with the plum and had found it easy for myself to get in and get out and do what I needed to do to continue operations. So I imagine it was quite the chaos, and it was a pleasure to see Mr. Larmuth out there waving his hands and managing people as they come. But I think you guys figured it out pretty well. So happy we can help make that a smooth transition on our end too.
Thanks for those comments, Zach. Adam?
Yeah, Carl, a few questions for you to follow up on Kelly's comment. Is Riverbend still accepting anything that's non-trash related, like clean dirt or concrete or things of that nature?
You know, Councilor Garvin, I only know what I read publicly, like most people. They have suggested that they're going to limit their operation to particular types of soils, which allow them to shape and form and do different things that you would probably be doing as you're section off and capping certain cells in the landfill. My understanding is that is the only kind of material they're accepting at this time. At least that's what they've put out there. I don't know if it's changed since I saw it last. It seems to be subject to change, but that's all I'm aware of at this time.
Okay, thank you. And this is more of a question for the transfer station. Are commercial contractors like Councilor Geary and others that do like roof tear-offs with dump bed trailers, or even private citizens that have dump bed trailers, is there at the current facility, they have the ability to just back up and use their power dumps like they did at Riverbend, or are they wanting to be everything put into those dumpsters?
As far as I know, at this point, anybody that has shown up to that facility has not been turned away for the lack of ability to dump their equipment. So those folks that go in there with the pulling the trailers, the tip trailers or dump trucks, we run them in through the same doors that our regular route trucks go in. And the team there and you know, our operations team, you know, Rich Keene and all our compliance folks, and even the Dave Larmus jumped in there to help make sure we could route everybody around there safely and effectively and hopefully efficient. So we're hopeful and that we'll be able to continue accommodating those folks as long as we need to.
Yeah, I did run through there a couple weeks back, and Dave and some other upper level management staff was out there, and that was nice to see, and everything went smooth. And I've also got some positive comments from citizens on some council Facebook posts I've made. So I think you guys are doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor. I offered to help. They declined my help. I'm not sure what that says about it.
Go ahead, Chris.
I just want to be making sure that I'm understanding that the purpose of this declaration is specifically just to give us flexibility to get around the conditions in the conditional use permit.
Yes, Counselor, that's exactly correct. And again, temporarily, typically, you know, a process, if it was something more permanent, they would have to go through an application process to get a modification done. But given that we see this as temporary, you know, that doesn't seem realistic or necessary.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Seeing none, then I will ask for a motion to approve resolution number 2021-47.
So moved.
So moved.
It's been moved by Zach and seconded by Chris. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, please signify by saying nay. Resolution number 2021-47 passes unanimously 6-0 this evening. That takes us through the agenda for our council meeting this evening. I will adjourn the city council meeting at 8:25. We're going to be going into executive session for those that are invited. Thank you all for your participation this evening.